Among the passengers of the Astral Express, March 7th's past is one of the many mysteries that surrounds the Nameless. Little is known about where she comes from, and even March herself doesn't remember anything past the point of her rescue. There has been a lot of speculation around who she really is, and one of the key drivers of her character's story arc is uncovering what her true past is. In fact, it's one of the key reasons she is traveling with the Nameless in the first place. Recently, however, her companion quest has shed some light into her origins, and it opens up a lot of interesting possibilities. So in this video, let's explore March 7th's past and try and determine who she really is. Before we discuss that though, if you want to see more Honkai Star Rail content, do consider subscribing to the channel. Now just to warn you, this is going to be a longer video than usual because there's a lot of things to unpack here in order to talk about March. Much of the context for theories that will come later in this video hasn't been explored in the main story as of this moment. So if you're only interested in the theory stuff, then I'll leave a timestamp you can jump to, but you might miss out on some crucial context. Let's start with a quick recap. If you didn't know, March did not join the Nameless in the most conventional means. She wasn't picked up at some random space station or planet the Astral Express just happened to travel to. Along one of their journeys, the Nameless came across a block of ice floating in the empty void of space. In this block of ice, a young girl was found trapped in stasis. The Nameless eventually decided to bring her aboard and succeeded in releasing her from her supposed prison. From this point on, March would then continue to travel with the Nameless, hoping to run into something from her past as she makes her way through the Trailblazer's journey. Despite not making much headway initially, there are hints at who she might be associated with even before the events of her companion quest. I covered some of these hints in a different video, but essentially, the biggest clue we have is the ice that March was initially found in. You see, the ice that encased her was not any normal kind of ice and had several unique properties. Himeko mentioned that the ice could assume at least 6 different structural makeups when put under different conditions and referred to them more as crystals rather than ice. March herself, who has the ability to create and wield the same substance, also feels her abilities are more akin to crystals and not traditional ice. This sole fact, paired with the memory loss, is why there has been a lot of speculation among the community that she might have a past that is related to the Path of Remembrance and its Eon, Fuli. Fast forward to today, this has somewhat been confirmed in her companion quest, but with a big asterisk. Now, I'll just give you a quick summary of March's companion quest so you have some context moving forward, but if you want to play it for yourself, which I suggest you do, consider this a spoiler warning. Having seen what the Matrix of Prescience was able to extract from Kafka during her interrogation, March decides to request the help of the Master Diviner of the Luofu in shedding some light on her own past. With the help of Wu Xuan, we essentially delve into March's subconscious mind to see if her past could be discerned. Now, throughout this journey, a few weird things happen. March increasingly encounters obstacles and memory loops that seem to want to prevent her from uncovering her past. The further back she goes, the more obstacles she encounters. It is when we reach the very edge of her past that we run into the person who is seemingly behind these obstacles, a member of the Garden of Recollection. The Garden of Recollection are a group of people in the service of the Eon of Remembrance, Fuli, and this but almost confirms part of what we have previously suspected to be March 7th's past. However, what is interesting is that this person, who I'll refer to as the messenger from now on, explains that what she is doing is not born out of any malevolent intent, and all she is trying to do is to protect March. After some sufficient pushing, the messenger eventually relents and shows March the point of her origin, though she still warns her that she shouldn't search beyond this. Unfortunately, she kinda cops out and essentially tells March that the only point of origin she should be concerned with is literally the point in which she was trapped in the six-faced ice. She claims that everything before this, which does imply that March indeed has a past, is irrelevant and just an illusion. March's purpose is rooted in the present and the future rather than the past, at least according to the messenger. She cuts the conversation short and gifts March with a light cone that depicts her trapped in the ice and disappears soon after. So yeah, we learned a bunch of things but are left with even more questions than before. First off, the fact that the Garden of Recollection is seemingly involved does seem to indicate that the Path of Remembrance is related to March's past in some way. The members of the Garden serve Fu Li by traveling the universe in search of memories to preserve, following in the footsteps of their Eon. They do this by creating memory bubbles and light cones. We don't know in detail how either of these things work or how they are manufactured. For example, do people lose the memories that are converted to light cones? If we assume that memories are forcibly taken to then be turned into light cones, what if March's past was made into a light cone and is the reason she has such a huge gap in her memory? It could also be the reason the Garden is so adamant in preventing her from searching for her past, so that this memory can exist instead as a light cone rather than in March's own mind. It implies that March may have witnessed or was involved in something so significant that the Garden feels the memory has to be preserved at all costs. However, this idea only really fits if we assume the Garden is only concerned with their own agenda and has little care for March, which, truth be told, isn't too out of character for them, but I digress. Throughout the companion quest, the messenger did mention several times that this was done to protect March and not due to some self-serving reason. Even Fu Xuan believes their actions to not be entirely malicious. So if it had nothing to do with preserving the memory of an event, what would have prompted them to help March in this way? The most reasonable and likely scenario is that March's past was so incredibly traumatic that this was the only way to ensure she has some semblance of a normal life moving forward. By expunging everything that happened to her in the past, perhaps she could be given a better chance at living out the rest of her life. Unearthing her past could cause all that trauma to return and overwhelm her, and thus result in March possibly going into some catatonic state. I don't know what she could have possibly witnessed that could be so significant and mentally taxing that this was the only solution. Perhaps she saw the birth of an eon, or maybe she learned of an unspeakable secret of the universe. A myriad of different possibilities exist. But one idea among many that stands out to me as the most interesting is perhaps she had previously died. A lot of the symbology around Fu Li focuses on the concept of rebirth. Fu Li is said to be storing these memories in anticipation for not only the destruction of the universe but also its eventual rebirth. In appearance, Fu Li also seems to have what seems to be a lotus flower resting on its shoulders, which in many cultures symbolizes rebirth and resurrection. So perhaps March had experienced an extremely traumatic death in the past, and out of pity or some other reason entirely, Fu Li brought her back, but without her memories. The fact that she was encased in ice may also have been March just recuperating from injuries or something. But why bring her back, and why her specifically? The eons tend to function beyond our own mortal understanding of time, so it's possible that March has a greater purpose to play in the future that we just don't know of yet. Maybe March is meant to witness something related to the main character and why her death wasn't something Fu Li could accept. Alternatively, it could be March has some strong connection to Fu Li in the past that he was willing to do this. Truth be told, it's really anyone's guess at this point. Now, despite these ideas having its own merits and associated problems, what we do know for sure is that many of the things revealed about March points us in the direction of the Remembrance and Fu Li. The crystal-like ice, the messenger from the Garden of Recollection, March's story revolving around memories, and even her penchant for taking pictures and creating new memories. They all seem to point to remembrance. Despite all this though, for some weird reason, Fu Xuan herself specifically mentions that we cannot assume Fu Li is involved without a reasonable doubt. All we can say for sure is that March's memories have been tampered with, likely by an eon. It makes me wonder why she would point this out, especially when, as I've mentioned, everything we've seen from our point of view indicates it really is the Remembrance and Fu Li. To add to that, many of the eons we know likely have very little interest in someone like March to even consider to do this, even in the situation that March knows something insanely important. Nanook, Ix, Noose, Klipoth, and a lot of the other eons are unlikely to be concerned with whatever March's past really is. But there is one possibility, an eon that may want to obscure whatever it is that March might know. Mythos, the Eon of the Enigmata. As I mentioned earlier, one of Fuli's supposed goals is to collect all the memories, events, and essentially information to preserve it for the rebirth of the next universe. This likely goes against what Mythos believes in, who helms the path of Enigmata and wants to prevent information from reaching sentient races. It could be that Mythos just isn't having any of this and decides to intervene and has influenced events to make it look like the remembrance just to throw itself off our scent. This also brings up a whole slew of different possibilities, though figuring out what Mythos might want to obscure can be very difficult, and for this idea to work, March must know something so incredibly important that Mythos would even be bothered to get involved. There is also the possibility that March may have been a high-ranking member of the Garden of Recollection in the past, perhaps even an emanator of Fuli, and Mythos' actions essentially amount to removing a general from the employ of its enemy. Now, the video being as long as it already is, I'm gonna stop speculating here. Truth be told, I have literally 10 other ideas of explaining what is going on here, from March being artificially created to March knowing some secret about the garden they don't want to reveal. So I might make a whole separate video altogether to explore these ideas if you guys are interested, but for now, let's bring this to a close. Truth be told, while we did get hints of a much bigger story behind March, the information we got here creates more questions than answers. Even the initial assumption of Fuli and the remembrance that we have being involved is now put into question and doubt by Fu Xuan herself. I'm not sure when this story thread will be picked up in the future, with us likely dealing with Harmony next, and Remembrance largely being a background player up till this point, if they appear at all, but when it eventually does, I think March will be at the center of a likely very huge event. Her past at this moment may be something significant to herself or may have ramifications for the greater universe, but whatever it may be, I am very much looking forward to unraveling it. Let me know in the comments what you think March's past really is, and if you enjoyed the video, consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Thanks so much for taking the time to watch this crazy long video, and as usual, have a nice day ahead.